Get ready, Staten Island.
Tonight, the Ferry Hawks host the Hagerstown Flying Boxcars with first pitch at 6:30. Thursday, it's a doubleheader starting at 4 p.m. with Jewish Heritage Night. As for this game, the Ferry Hawks will play as the Staten Island Menches. Friday at 7 p.m., it's soccer night and kids glow around the bases postgame. Saturday at 6:30, it's Broadway night with postgame fireworks and Broadway rave. Sunday at 1:30, it's Military Appreciation Day and the kids run around the bases.
Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
I was talking about this LA vote rigging story and how serious this is, because it follows that pattern that I've been talking about for years, really, that we're kind of in the bleeding Kansas stage of our fracture as a nation. We've become violent now amongst each other. I would argue that almost all the violence has been from the left against the right, and the right really isn't retaliating or starting much, but this continues in this way, there will be retaliations. I mean, that's just the human nature. And I wanted to add the fact, based in light of what we've seen in Los Angeles, that while we know, many of you may know, even if you're just a casual historian or student of history, you may know that while there was violence between the pro-slavers and anti-slavers in Kansas and some of the other territories in the United States leading up to the Civil War, there was also ballot stuffing. Ballot stuffing was part of the conflict. It was a weapon used in the conflict, and here we are. You know, when I hear about ballot stuffing and specifically about the use of homeless people on Skid Row, that's a neighbor that they call that area in Los Angeles, which has been caught on video, but it was also where these mail-in ballots came in predominantly for Nithya Raman. It reminds me of the story of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, the great poet and novelist, one of the great writers in American history. Brilliant person, by the way. You know, a lot of people note that he got into all these great universities and got kicked out. He never got kicked out for being a bad student. He got kicked out for gambling, for other stuff like that. Probably being creepy. All kidding aside, Edgar Allan Poe was like one of those people on Skid Row that we saw in Los Angeles, forced to vote. That's how Edgar Allan Poe died. He was suffering from the effects of rabies, which is, by the way, excruciating, apparently. And instead of getting him help, the Democrats in Baltimore took him on Election Day and ran him in and out of the ballot box 100 times. And then they just threw him on the street where he died. Lovely story. But, you know, when you hear about people going to Skid Row in Los Angeles, and instead of helping these homeless people, instead of maybe trying to get them into a program, maybe becoming advocates for drug rehab and better mental health care in this country, you're just using them as literal fodder, almost literal fodder, to just have them help you balance a ballot stuff and harvest ballots. It's cruelty. In addition to fraud, it's real human cruelty. How does a person go into a homeless area and just say, here's a couple of bucks, sign this ballot, and then go home? How do you do that? What kind of person are you? I've always wondered about that. Who were the people who used Edgar Allan Poe in that way, who was in excruciating pain, and decided, oh, here's a guy we can get who won't give us much resistance when we try to get him. You know, it was called running repeaters in the 19th century. They used to say repeaters because they would just run them into the ballot, the voting booth 100 times. Anyway, that's what made me think of. And then the last personal story is, as some of you know, I've written about this. I wrote an editorial about it for CNBC years ago. My great-great-grandfather was a notorious Chicago mobster turned politician named Morris Eller. And more is coming out about him now that a lot of the out-of-print papers are now available on the internet. We know a lot more about my great-great-grandfather Morris Eller than we used to. We knew a lot about him, though. My grandmother was his favorite granddaughter, I think, person in the whole world. So I knew a lot of work about him. And he was involved in a lot of vote rigging stuff in Chicago in the early 20th century. And one of the more brilliant things he did to influence elections was actually not rig any votes. He would kidnap the people from the Democratic Party. He was a Republican. He would kidnap the people from the Democratic Party who were looking to stuff the ballot box, put them up at a hotel in Chicago at gunpoint, feed them well, and then let them go after election day was over. It's actually a brilliant way to quote-unquote rig an election. Just stop the other guys from doing it. But, folks, vote rigging happens. It's silly to think that it doesn't. That was the big argument in America, and they're still trying to say, well, there's no proof in L.A. Yes, there is. There's proof. We have video proof. And we also have common sense. And if you want to be the nudnik who says, well, you don't have proof of every single ballot, then, fine. So, then be that person's lawyer in court. Is there enough evidence to put someone in jail over it in a court of law? I don't know. But I'm glad that we have higher standards in the courts for that. That's fine. But we know that this election was stolen. And we know that this election involved people with the lowest moral character. Who the heck goes into Skid Row in Los Angeles and says, let me help these people. No, I'm not going to help them. I'm going to have them, here's a couple bucks, sign a bunch of these ballots. Here's one for ramen, one for Bass. Thank you very much. Here's 2, 3, however many they did. Just disgusting stuff.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?